I stood at the family barbecue holding a manila envelope, watching my sister Diane publicly humiliate me in front of 20 relatives. She announced I needed to stop being a freeloader and move out of her house by tomorrow. The family erupted in supportive laughter, nodding agreement. My parents beamed proudly at Diane while shooting disapproving glances at me. Uncle Frank joked about grown women living off charity. My heart pounded as I processed the betrayal, realizing my entire family believed Diane owned the property I had been secretly paying for through a private mortgage arrangement. Standing there in the humid July afternoon, watching potato salad being passed around the picnic table like it was any normal family gathering, I felt the ground shift beneath my feet. The betrayal cut deeper than any physical wound could have managed. These people who claimed to love me had already decided I was the family failure, the deadweight dragging everyone down. 3 years ago, when Grandma Helen passed away, she left behind more than just memories and her beautiful Victorian home on Maple Street. The property came with $87,000 in unpaid taxes, outstanding liens, and legal complications that made everyone in the family throw up their hands in frustration. While my parents, aunts, uncles, and cousins spent months arguing over whether to sell the house to pay the debts, I took action. My freelance graphic design business had been thriving. Corporate clients paid well for logo redesigns, website layouts, and marketing materials. I had been careful with money, living simply and saving aggressively. When the family debates grew louder and the auction notice appeared in the county newspaper, I approached a private lender who specialized in quick property acquisitions. The paperwork took 6 weeks to complete. I used $30,000 of my own savings as a down payment and secured financing for the remaining balance. When the auction day arrived, I sat in the county courthouse and successfully bid on Grandma Helen's house. Nobody from my family even showed up that Tuesday morning in October. I never told anyone what I had done. The family assumed the house had sold to some anonymous investor, and I let them believe it. When Diane approached me 2 months later, sobbing about her messy divorce and needing somewhere to stay temporarily, I offered her grandma's house. She moved in with her 7-year-old daughter, Emma, and I genuinely wanted to help them through a difficult transition. What I discovered today changed everything. While Diane grilled hamburgers and played the gracious hostess, accepting compliments on her beautiful home and her generosity toward her troubled sister, I learned she had been collecting rent from other family members. Cousin Bradley and his girlfriend Jessica had moved into the basement apartment 6 months ago. They handed Diane $600 every month, believing they were helping her cover mortgage payments. My recently widowed Aunt Ruth rented the converted garage space for another $600 monthly, thinking she was supporting Diane's kind gesture of keeping the family home. $1,200 every month. Diane had been pocketing rent money while telling everyone she was supporting me out of sisterly compassion. She portrayed herself as the successful, responsible sibling who owned property and took care of family members in need. Meanwhile, she painted me as mentally unstable, financially irresponsible, and completely dependent on her generosity. The worst part was watching my family believe every word. They nodded sympathetically when Diane mentioned my emotional problems. They praised her patience when she described my inability to contribute to household expenses. They offered advice about tough love and enabling when she expressed concern about my future. I excused myself from the picnic table, walking past the badminton net where my teenage cousins played past the flower garden Grandma Helen had planted 40 years ago, past the wooden swing my grandfather had built before I was born. Every step toward the house felt surreal, like walking through someone else's nightmare. In my bedroom office on the second floor, I could hear the barbecue conversation continuing below. Someone suggested I needed professional counseling. Someone else recommended a local job placement agency. Diane accepted their concern, gracefully sighing about the burden of caring for a family member who refused to grow up. I sat at my desk and opened the manila envelope I had been carrying. Inside were documents I hoped never to need, papers that would change everything once the truth came out. But first, I needed to understand exactly how deep this deception went. My bedroom window overlooked the backyard, and with the screen open, every word of their conversation drifted up to me like smoke from the charcoal grill. I listened while organizing the documentation that would soon turn their world upside down. Diane was in full performance mode, gesturing with a plastic cup of lemonade while she spun tales about my supposed mental health crisis. According to her version of events, I had been spiraling since losing a major client last spring. She claimed I spent entire days in my room refusing to look for steady employment or contribute to household responsibilities. Cousin Sarah nodded knowingly, mentioning that she had noticed I seemed withdrawn during recent family gatherings. Uncle Frank added that I appeared anxious and unfocused, suggesting I might benefit from medication. My mother, Patricia, wiped tears from her eyes, expressing gratitude that Diane had stepped up to help her troubled daughter. The cruelty of it struck me breathless. Diane had been carefully constructing this narrative for months, laying groundwork for today's public eviction. Every family interaction had been orchestrated to support her story. When I declined invitations to go shopping with the women, Diane interpreted it as social withdrawal. When I worked late on client projects, she described it as isolation and depression. When I preferred reading to watching television, she characterized it as antisocial behavior. I pulled out my laptop and began printing documents, each page representing another nail in the coffin of Diane's elaborate deception. The original property deed recorded at the county courthouse clearly showed my name as the sole owner. The mortgage paperwork detailed my financing arrangement with Heritage Private Lending. Monthly statements proved I had never missed a single payment. Utility bills told the same story: electric, gas, water, garbage collection, internet service, property insurance. Everything in my name paid from my business checking account. I had been covering these expenses for 3 years, while Diane collected rent money and played house with my property. But the real revelation came when I found the stack of mail hidden behind my desk. Letters I had been expecting, but never received correspondence that should have been delivered weeks ago. I realized Diane had been intercepting my mail opening envelopes addressed to me and hiding anything that might expose her lies. Among the hidden letters was a refinancing offer from my mortgage company. Interest rates had dropped significantly, and they were offering to restructure my loan with payments nearly $400 lower per month. Another letter contained a property tax reassessment showing the house value had increased by $40,000 since my purchase. The most damaging evidence was a certified letter from Heritage Private Lending dated 2 weeks ago, confirming my excellent payment history and pre-approving me for additional credit if I wanted to make property improvements. This letter alone would destroy Diane's claims about my financial irresponsibility. I also discovered something that made my blood run cold. In a manila folder wedged behind my filing cabinet, I found copies of official documents with my name forged in Diane's handwriting. She had been practicing my signature, apparently preparing to impersonate me on legal paperwork. The implications were staggering. Diane had not only lied to our family about owning the house, she had been planning to commit fraud by forging my signature on property documents. The level of premeditation and calculation behind her actions went far beyond simple deception. Through the window, I heard Uncle Roger arrive with his new girlfriend, Melissa. Diane rushed to greet them, her voice carrying across the yard as she explained the family crisis requiring everyone's support. She described my emotional instability and her difficult decision to set boundaries for my own good. Roger expressed admiration for Diane's strength and wisdom. Melissa offered to help with the intervention, sharing stories about enabling family members and the importance of tough love. They spoke about me like I was a troubled teenager instead of a 32-year-old woman who had successfully purchased and maintained property while building a thriving business. The conversation turned to practical matters. Where would I live after tomorrow? Should someone drive me to a women's shelter or halfway house? Did I have enough clothing and personal items to start over somewhere else? They discussed my future with clinical detachment as if I were an object to be relocated rather than a person with feelings and rights. I realized this was not a spontaneous family intervention. This was a carefully planned campaign designed to isolate me from family support while establishing Diane as the responsible, long-suffering sister who had finally reached her limit. She had been building this narrative for months, waiting for the right moment to execute her plan. The most heartbreaking part was hearing genuine concern in their voices. These people truly believed they were helping me by supporting Diane's decision. They thought they were participating in a necessary intervention that would force me to take responsibility for my life. They had no idea they were being manipulated by someone who had been systematically lying to all of us. I stood up from my desk, walked to the window, and looked down at the gathering. 20 people who claimed to love me, all convinced I was the problem that needed solving. 20 people who would have their entire understanding of this family shattered in the next few minutes. The manila envelope in my hands contained more than legal documents. It held the power to expose years of deception and restore truth to our family relationships. But using this power would change everything forever, destroying illusions and forcing everyone to confront how easily they had been manipulated. I took a deep breath and headed downstairs. Walking down the creaky stairs that Grandma Helen had climbed for 60 years, I felt the weight of history and responsibility pressing against my shoulders. Each step brought me closer to a confrontation that would either restore my dignity or complete my destruction, depending on how skillfully Diane had prepared her defenses. The back door opened just as I reached the kitchen, and Jake stepped inside. My youngest cousin, 16 years old and still growing into his lanky frame, looked around nervously before approaching me. Unlike the rest of the family, Jake had always been observant and thoughtful, preferring to watch and listen rather than jump to conclusions. He moved closer, lowering his voice to barely above a whisper. "Carol, I need to tell you something important. I have been watching what is happening here, and something does not feel right about this whole situation." I set the manila envelope on the kitchen counter, giving Jake my full attention. His serious expression and careful tone suggested he had information that could change everything. "I saw Diane going through your mail last week," he continued, glancing toward the back door to ensure we would not be overheard. "She was in your room when you went grocery shopping, and she had a bunch of envelopes spread across your desk. When I asked what she was doing, she said she was helping organize your bills because you were too stressed to handle them properly." My heart began racing as Jake confirmed what I had suspected. "Did you see which envelopes she was opening?" "Several of them. I remember one from some kind of lending company, and another one that looked official with a government return address. She put some of the letters in a folder and took them to her room. I thought it was weird, but she explained it like she was doing you a favor." Jake paused, looking increasingly uncomfortable as he processed the implications of what he had witnessed. "There is more, Carol. I heard phone conversations that did not make sense. Last Tuesday, Diane was talking to someone about rent increases and tenant screening procedures. She was discussing lease agreements and security deposits like she was a landlord. The pieces of the puzzle were falling into place, but I needed more information before making any accusations." "What exactly did you hear her say?" "She was telling someone that she owned a large Victorian property with multiple rental units and that she was very selective about tenants because she wanted to maintain a family-friendly environment. She mentioned having a basement apartment and a garage conversion, both currently occupied by reliable long-term renters." This confirmed my worst suspicions. Diane had not only been collecting rent from family members, she had been actively marketing herself as a property owner to potential outside tenants. She was building an entire business model around property she did not own, planning to expand her rental income beyond our relatives. There is something else. Jake continued, his voice growing more urgent. I heard her talking to Uncle Roger about moving in after your eviction. She was promising him the entire second floor, saying it would give him plenty of space and privacy. He was talking about scheduling moving trucks and transferring his mail delivery. The scope of Diane's deception was breathtaking. She had been making concrete promises to multiple family members based on her false ownership claims. Uncle Roger had been planning his future around living in a house that Diane had no legal right to offer him. Jake, this information is incredibly important. Would you be willing to tell the family what you witnessed? He nodded firmly, though I could see nervousness in his young face. I do not like seeing you treated this way, Carol. You have always been kind to me, and this whole situation feels wrong. I have been thinking about speaking up, but I was not sure anyone would listen to me because I am just a teenager. Your age does not matter when you are telling the truth. Actually, your willingness to speak up shows more maturity than most of the adults out here have demonstrated today. Jake smiled slightly, gaining confidence from my encouragement. Should we go outside now and tell everyone what really happened? Not quite yet. I need to organize my evidence first, and I want to be strategic about how we present this information. Diane has been building her story for months, so we need to be prepared for her to fight back hard when we challenge her version of events. What can I do to help? I looked at this brave young man who was willing to stand up for truth despite potential family backlash, and I felt genuine gratitude for having at least one ally in this fight. Can you keep listening and watching for any additional lies Diane tells over the next few minutes? I need to know exactly what stories she is still spinning so I can address them specifically. Absolutely. I will pay attention to every word. As Jake headed back outside, I heard Uncle Roger's voice growing louder and more animated. He was apparently describing his plans for moving into what he believed was Diane's house, discussing furniture arrangements and storage solutions with enthusiasm. Through the kitchen window, I watched Diane nodding and smiling, encouraging Roger's planning while making additional promises about household arrangements. She was deepening her deception, even as I stood 10 feet away with evidence that could destroy everything she was building. But Roger was not the only person being manipulated. I could see that Diane had also drawn Aunt Margaret into a conversation about helping me find appropriate housing after my eviction. Margaret was taking notes on her phone, apparently researching transitional housing programs and mental health support services. The genuine care and concern in these conversations made the situation even more heartbreaking. These people were investing time and emotional energy into helping me because they believed Diane's portrayal of the situation. They were trying to be good family members, supporting what they thought was a necessary intervention. I realized that when I exposed the truth, I would not only be proving my innocence and revealing Diane's guilt, I would also be showing my family how easily they had been deceived, how readily they had accepted negative assumptions about me without questioning the source of their information. This revelation would force everyone to confront uncomfortable questions about trust, judgment, and family loyalty. Some people might feel embarrassed or defensive about being fooled. Others might redirect their anger from me toward Diane, creating new conflicts within the family. But continuing to let this deception grow would only make the eventual reckoning more painful. Diane was making increasingly elaborate promises that she could never fulfill. Roger was making concrete plans based on false information. Other family members were emotionally investing in a crisis that did not actually exist. I picked up the manila envelope and walked toward the back door. It was time to stop this charade before it caused even more damage to our family relationships. Jake caught my eye as I stepped onto the patio, giving me a small nod of encouragement. Having his support made the next few minutes feel slightly less overwhelming, though I knew the conversation ahead would test every relationship in ways we had never experienced before. The summer afternoon heat had intensified, and the family gathering had spread across the entire backyard. Some relatives clustered around the picnic tables while others stood near the flower beds or sat in lawn chairs beneath the old oak tree. The normalcy of the scene made what I was about to reveal feel even more surreal. Jake had positioned himself strategically near different conversation groups, and I watched him listening intently while pretending to check his phone. His dedication to gathering information impressed me, and I wondered how many other details about Diane's deception had gone unnoticed by adults who were too polite or too trusting to question her stories. I decided to conduct my own investigation before making any public announcements. Moving casually through the gathering, I listened to fragments of conversation while organizing my thoughts and evidence. Near the badminton net, Cousin Sarah was explaining to her teenage daughter how important it was to learn from my negative example. She described me as someone who had avoided responsibility for too long and needed harsh consequences to motivate real change. Her tone was educational rather than cruel, but hearing myself discussed as a cautionary tale still stung. At the picnic table, Uncle Frank was sharing his expertise about rental properties and tenant rights. He was advising Diane about proper eviction procedures, emphasizing the importance of following legal protocols to avoid potential lawsuits. His well-intentioned guidance was helping Diane understand how to remove me from my own property more effectively. The irony was almost unbearable. Frank was literally teaching Diane how to illegally evict me from the house I owned, believing he was helping her navigate a legitimate landlord-tenant situation. His legal advice would have been valuable if Diane actually owned the property, but instead it was just giving her more sophisticated tools for fraud. I approached Aunt Ruth, who was sitting alone in a lawn chair, looking somewhat uncomfortable with the afternoon's events. Ruth had always been the family peacemaker, preferring gentle conversations to dramatic confrontations. "Oh, Aunt Ruth, can I ask you something personal about your living situation?" She looked up with concern, probably assuming I was going to request housing assistance after my eviction. "Of course, honey. What do you need to know?" "How long have you been renting the garage apartment from Diane?" "About 8 months now. After your Uncle Robert passed away, I could not afford to maintain our house on my pension alone. Diane offered me the garage space for $600 a month, which was incredibly generous considering what apartments cost these days." Ruth's grateful tone made my stomach turn. She genuinely believed Diane was doing her a favor by charging rent for space in a house Diane did not own. "Has Diane ever shown you a lease agreement or any official rental documents?" "Oh, no, nothing that formal. We just have a family understanding. I give her cash every month and she takes care of maintenance and utilities. It works perfectly for both of us." I realized Ruth had no legal protection whatsoever. She was paying rent without any documentation, completely vulnerable to sudden eviction or arbitrary rule changes. If Diane could manipulate the family into believing she owned the house, Ruth could lose her housing without any recourse. "Or, Ruth, what would you do if you had to find other housing quickly?" Her face paled slightly. "I honestly do not know, Carol. Affordable apartments for seniors have very long waiting lists, and I do not have enough savings for security deposits and moving expenses. I have been so grateful to have a stable situation with family." She paused, looking worried. "Why are you asking? Is Diane planning to sell the house?" I felt terrible for frightening her, but she deserved to understand her true situation. I am just trying to understand all the housing arrangements before making any decisions about my own future. Moving away from Ruth before my emotions overwhelmed me, I sought out Bradley and Jessica at their basement apartment entrance. They were both in their early 20s, recently graduated from community college and working entry-level jobs, while saving money for their future. "Hey, Bradley, I wanted to ask about your rental arrangement. How did that get started?" Bradley grinned, clearly proud of their housing situation. "Diane offered us this space 6 months ago when we were struggling to find anything affordable. $600 a month for a 1-bedroom basement apartment in this neighborhood was an incredible deal. Most places were asking twice that amount." Jessica nodded enthusiastically. Diane has been such a wonderful landlord. She is flexible about rent due dates when we have unexpected expenses, and she never makes us feel bad about being young and still learning how to manage everything. Their appreciation for Diane's supposed generosity made the situation even more tragic. This young couple had been paying $600 monthly to live in my basement, believing they were helping a generous family member cover her mortgage expenses. They had no idea they were funding Diane's elaborate deception. "Have you two signed a lease or any rental agreement?" "Nothing formal," Jessica replied. "Diane said family does not need complicated paperwork. We just pay her cash every month and help with yard work occasionally." Like Ruth Bradley and Jessica had no legal protection. They were completely dependent on Diane's goodwill, unaware that her authority over their housing was entirely fabricated. As I processed these conversations, Jake approached with information that made everything worse. "Carol, I overheard something really disturbing. Diane was talking quietly with Mom and Dad about your financial problems, and she mentioned something about your business failing because clients do not trust you anymore." My parents had been sitting with Diane near the rose garden, their heads close together in what appeared to be a serious family discussion. I had avoided that conversation, but apparently it had been even more damaging than I realized. "What exactly did she tell them?" "She said several of your regular clients stopped working with you because you missed deadlines and submitted poor quality work. She claimed you have been lying about your income and that your business checking account is almost empty." This was completely false. My freelance graphic design business was thriving with a waiting list of potential clients and steady income that exceeded most people's full-time salaries. I had been careful about saving money and building an emergency fund specifically to avoid the kind of financial crisis Diane was describing. She also told them you have been borrowing money from her regularly and that she has been covering your basic living expenses for over a year. The systematic nature of these lies was breathtaking. Diane had constructed an entire alternative reality where I was a failed businesswoman, completely dependent on her support. She had convinced my parents that she was financially supporting me while I contributed nothing to the household. "There is one more thing, Carol. I heard Diane on the phone earlier with someone about scheduling a property inspection. She was discussing getting an official appraisal and talking to real estate agents about market conditions." My blood ran cold as I understood the implications. Diane was not just planning to evict me from my own house. She was planning to sell my property, probably by forging my signature on sale documents. The timeline suddenly made sense. She needed me gone before any real estate professionals started asking detailed questions about legal ownership. "Jake, this is much more serious than I initially realized. Diane is planning to commit major fraud, and she is using our entire family to help her do it." "Oh, what are you going to do?" I looked around the backyard at 20 people who believed they were supporting a necessary family intervention, having no idea they were participating in an elaborate crime. The longer I waited to expose the truth, the deeper everyone would be drawn into Diane's deception. "I am going to show them the property deed and explain exactly what has been happening here." Jake nodded firmly. "I will back you up with everything I witnessed." As we walked toward the center of the gathering, I felt the weight of the manila envelope in my hands and the enormity of what was about to unfold. In a few minutes, I would either restore truth to our family or face complete rejection if somehow Diane had prepared defenses I had not anticipated. But there was no turning back now. Too many people were being hurt by this deception, and the consequences would only grow more severe if I allowed it to continue. The late afternoon sun cast long shadows across the backyard as I retreated to my bedroom one final time before the confrontation. Through my window, I could see the family gathering had taken on an almost festive atmosphere with people genuinely enjoying themselves despite the supposed crisis requiring their attention. My laptop was still open on the desk, and I decided to gather additional documentation that would make my case absolutely bulletproof. I navigated to my online banking portal and printed recent statements showing mortgage payments, property tax payments, and utility payments spanning the past 3 years. Every transaction was clearly labeled with the property address and my account information. Next, I accessed the county recorder's website and printed certified copies of all property documents. The original deed transfer the mortgage filing the property tax records. Everything was available online with official county seals and recording stamps. No one could claim these documents were forged or altered when they came directly from government databases. I also printed my business income statements and tax returns, proving my freelance graphic design work generated substantial revenue. These documents would destroy Diane's claims about my financial instability and her supposed financial support of my lifestyle. But I needed more than just paperwork. I needed a strategic plan for presenting this information in a way that would maximize impact while minimizing Diane's ability to deflect or create alternative explanations. I called the county recorder's office even though it was Saturday afternoon, hoping their automated verification system would be available. After navigating through several menu options, I reached a service that allowed me to verify property ownership by entering the address and my identification number. The automated system confirmed my ownership and provided a reference number I could share with anyone who wanted to independently verify the information. Next, I contacted Heritage Private Lending's weekend customer service line. After providing my account number and security information, I requested an immediate verification letter that would confirm my mortgage payments account standing and loan balance. The representative agreed to email an official statement within 30 minutes. I also decided to create a simple timeline document that would help family members understand the sequence of events. Using large fonts and clear headings, I created a one-page summary showing when Grandma Helen died, when the property went to auction, when I purchased it, when Diane moved in, and when she began collecting rent from other family members. The timeline made the deception obvious, even to people unfamiliar with real estate transactions. Anyone could see that I had owned the property for months before Diane ever lived there, and that her rent collection began long after she should have known who the real owner was. While organizing these documents, I received the promised email from Heritage Private Lending. Their official letterhead and detailed account summary provided additional credibility to my claims. The letter specifically noted my excellent payment history and current loan balance information that would be impossible to fake convincingly. I also prepared copies of everything for key family members. Uncle Frank would receive extra documentation because of his real estate background. He would be able to verify the authenticity and significance of each document. My parents would get simplified summaries that focused on the emotional betrayal rather than legal technicalities. Jake would receive a complete set of everything, both as a thank you for his support and as insurance in case Diane tried to destroy evidence after the confrontation. But as I organized these materials, I realized I was facing a more complex problem than simple documentation. Diane had been building emotional narratives, not just financial lies. She had convinced the family that I was mentally unstable, unreliable, and potentially dangerous to myself. Even with perfect documentation, some people might assume I had forged the papers or was experiencing some kind of psychological break. I needed to present the information in a way that addressed both the factual errors and the emotional manipulation. People needed to understand not just what Diane had done, but why they had been so ready to believe negative things about me without questioning the source. Through the window, I noticed Uncle Roger was now carrying boxes from his car toward the house. He was apparently moving some belongings in preparation for his planned residency after my eviction. The sight of him actively preparing to move into my property based on Diane's false promises made the situation feel even more urgent. I decided to document this activity with my phone camera. If Diane later claimed she never promised Roger housing, I would have evidence of his moving preparations. I carefully photographed him carrying boxes and furniture, making sure the timestamps would prove these activities occurred during the barbecue. I also decided to research the legal implications of what Diane had been doing. A quick internet search revealed that attempting to forge property deeds was a felony in our state, punishable by significant fines and potential imprisonment. Collecting rent on property you do not own could be prosecuted as fraud, especially if the amounts exceeded certain thresholds. The rental income Diane had collected from Ruth Bradley and Jessica totaled over $14,000 during the past 8 months. Combined with her attempted forgery and her plans to sell property she did not own, she was potentially facing serious criminal charges beyond simple family deception. This knowledge changed my approach to the confrontation. I was not just exposing lies to preserve family relationships. I was potentially preventing felony crimes that could result in Diane facing years in prison. I printed information about tenant rights and fraud penalties, both to protect the family members who had been paying rent, and to help everyone understand the severity of Diane's actions. Ruth Bradley and Jessica deserved to know they had been victims of fraud, not willing participants in legitimate rental agreements. I also prepared a simple statement explaining my decision to purchase the property privately. I wanted the family to understand that I had tried to preserve Grandma Helen's house when no one else was willing or able to take action. My secrecy had been intended to avoid family conflicts, not to enable Diane's deception. As I finished organizing everything, I heard increased activity outside. Car doors were slamming and voices were growing louder and more animated. It sounded like additional family members were arriving, potentially expanding my audience for the upcoming revelation. I checked my appearance in the mirror, wanting to look calm and composed rather than emotional or confrontational. The next few minutes would determine whether truth or deception would control our family relationships going forward. With the manila envelope containing all my evidence, I walked downstairs for the final time as the family scapegoat. When I returned to this house after the confrontation, I would either be recognized as the property owner I had always been, or I would be preparing to defend myself against family members who chose to support Diane's version of reality regardless of evidence. But I had exhausted all other options. Allowing Diane's deception to continue would only lead to more people being hurt and more serious crimes being committed. Whatever happened next, at least I would know I had fought for truth and protected innocent family members from further exploitation. The kitchen counter became my war room as I spread documents across its surface in careful organization. Every piece of paper represented another layer of protection against Diane's elaborate deception, another brick in the fortress of truth I was building. I created separate folders for different audiences and purposes. The first folder contained simplified summaries for family members who might be overwhelmed by complex legal documents. These included my timeline chart, basic property ownership verification, and a simple explanation of what had been happening with rental payments. The second folder held detailed legal documentation for Uncle Frank and anyone else who wanted to examine technical evidence. County records, mortgage statements, tax payments, business income records. Everything that would satisfy a skeptical reviewer who understood real estate transactions. The third folder contained evidence of Diane's specific lies and fraudulent activities. The intercepted mail, the forged signature practice sheets, the rental income records, and photographs of Uncle Roger moving belongings based on false housing promises. I also prepared a fourth folder containing tenant protection information for Ruth Bradley and Jessica. They needed to understand their rights as victims of rental fraud and their options for recovering money they had paid under false pretenses. My phone buzzed with text messages from my business clients reminding me that I had a successful professional life that contradicted every claim Diane had made about my supposed failures. I screenshot several recent client communications praising my work quality and requesting additional projects, adding this evidence to my collection. The email from Heritage Private Lending provided official verification of my mortgage account status. I printed multiple copies on high-quality paper, knowing that official letterhead would carry more weight than personal documents that skeptical family members might question. I also prepared a comprehensive financial statement showing my business income savings account balance and monthly expenses. This information would prove I was not only financially stable, but actually more prosperous than most family members realized. The numbers directly contradicted every story Diane had told about supporting me through financial crisis. But as I organized this overwhelming evidence, I realized I was preparing for a battle that went beyond simple factual disputes. Diane had been manipulating emotions and relationships, not just misrepresenting financial information. Some family members might cling to their existing beliefs even when confronted with undeniable proof. I decided to prepare for potential objections and defensive reactions. What would Diane say when confronted with property records showing my ownership? How would she explain the forged signature practice sheets? What excuse could she offer for collecting rent on property she did not own? More importantly, how would family members react to learning they had been completely deceived? Would they feel embarrassed about being fooled? Would they blame me for not revealing the truth sooner? Would they support Diane despite evidence of her fraud? I created a simple script for myself, planning how to present information calmly and clearly without appearing vindictive or cruel. My goal was to restore truth and protect innocent people, not to humiliate Diane or make family members feel stupid for believing her lies. Through the window, I could see the gathering was growing larger and more animated. Additional relatives had arrived, and everyone seemed to be enjoying themselves despite the supposed family crisis requiring their attention. The disconnect between the festive atmosphere and the serious accusations being made against me felt increasingly surreal. Uncle Frank was now holding court near the picnic table, apparently sharing more legal advice about proper eviction procedures. I could see him gesturing and explaining something with great authority, completely unaware that he was helping Diane plan to illegally remove me from my own property. Cousin Sarah was taking notes on her phone, possibly researching housing resources or mental health services she thought I would need after my eviction. Her genuine concern and willingness to help made the situation even more heartbreaking. My parents sat close together on lawn chairs, occasionally glancing toward the house with worried expressions. They were probably discussing their disappointment in my supposed behavior and their gratitude for Diane's patience with their troubled daughter. The sight of these good people investing time and emotional energy into a completely fabricated crisis made me angry in ways I had never experienced. Diane was not just lying about property ownership. She was manipulating people who loved me into believing I was someone they needed to reject and abandon. I gathered all my documentation into a single presentation folder, arranging everything in logical order for maximum impact. The property deed would come first, establishing my ownership clearly and immediately. The mortgage and utility documents would follow, proving I had been financially responsible for the property for years. The evidence of Diane's deception would come next: the intercepted mail, the forged signatures, the rental collection records. Finally, I would present protection information for the family members who had been paying rent under false pretenses. As I prepared to return to the backyard, my phone rang with a call from my mortgage company's weekend customer service line. I had requested additional verification, and they were calling to confirm they could provide immediate written confirmation of my account standing and ownership status. After providing my account information, the representative agreed to email an official letter within 15 minutes. This additional documentation would make my case even stronger, providing real-time verification that no one could claim was outdated or falsified. I also took photographs of all my documentation, uploading everything to secure cloud storage in case Diane tried to destroy physical evidence during the confrontation. The digital copies would be accessible from any computer or phone, providing permanent backup of everything I needed to prove my case. With my evidence, fortress complete, I realized there was no more preparation I could do. I had overwhelming proof of property ownership, clear evidence of Diane's fraud, and protection information for family members who had been victimized. The truth was about to emerge whether Diane was ready or not. I picked up my presentation folder and walked toward the back door, knowing that everything was about to change for everyone involved. Some changes would be positive: truth replacing lies, justice replacing exploitation. Other changes would be painful: destroyed trust, embarrassed family members, potential criminal consequences for Diane. But continuing to enable this deception would only make the eventual reckoning more severe. Diane was making increasingly elaborate promises she could never fulfill, drawing more family members into her web of lies. Uncle Roger was actively moving belongings based on false housing arrangements. Other relatives were researching services for a mental health crisis that did not exist. The longer this continued, the more people would be hurt when reality finally emerged. I was not destroying our family by revealing the truth. I was preventing Diane from destroying it through escalating fraud and manipulation. Morning had evolved into afternoon, and the family barbecue had settled into the comfortable rhythm of people who genuinely enjoyed each other's company. The irony was not lost on me that this fraudulent gathering felt more harmonious than many legitimate family events we had shared over the years. I positioned myself near the kitchen window, both to observe the dynamics below and to steel my nerves for what was coming. The manila envelope felt heavier with each passing moment, weighted with the responsibility of shattering so many carefully constructed illusions. Uncle Roger had apparently recruited Bradley and Jake to help him move furniture from his car to what he believed would be his new living space on the second floor of the house. Watching them carry his belongings through my front door while discussing room arrangements and storage solutions made my stomach churn with a mixture of anger and heartbreak. These were good people being manipulated into participating in what was essentially a planned burglary. Roger was moving his possessions into my house based on false promises from someone who had no authority to make them. Bradley was helping because he thought he was supporting family cooperation. Jake was participating because adults had told him this was the right thing to do. Through the open window, I could hear Diane directing the furniture placement with the confidence of someone who genuinely owned the property. She was telling Roger which room would be his, where he could store seasonal items, how they would share common areas like the kitchen and living room. The upstairs bathroom is all yours, Roger. Carol only used the downstairs one anyway, so you will have complete privacy up there. This is perfect, Diane. I cannot tell you how much this means to me. Having stable housing in a family setting is exactly what I need right now. We are family, Roger. We take care of each other. I just wish I could have offered this arrangement sooner. The manipulation in her voice was obvious to me now, but Roger heard only generosity and family loyalty. He was planning his future around living in space that Diane had no right to offer, making decisions about furniture, placement, and household routines based on complete lies. Worse, I could see that other family members were treating this housing arrangement as permanent. Aunt Margaret was discussing holiday hosting duties with Diane, assuming Roger would be available for family gatherings at the house. Cousin Sarah was talking about bringing her children for weekend visits, apparently assuming the household would remain stable under Diane's leadership. My phone buzzed with the promised email from Heritage Private Lending. Their official verification letter contained every detail I needed to prove my mortgage account status and ownership rights. The letterhead alone would carry more credibility than any document I could have prepared myself. I printed the letter immediately, adding it to my growing collection of evidence. With county records, mortgage verification utility bills, business income statements, and documentation of Diane's fraudulent activities, I had assembled an overwhelming case that would be impossible to dismiss or explain away. But as I watched the scene below, I realized the evidence was only part of the challenge I was facing. Diane had not just told lies about property ownership, she had created an entire alternative reality where I was an unstable burden requiring family intervention. Every interaction I witnessed reinforced the narrative she had carefully constructed. When people discuss my supposed mental health crisis, they reference specific incidents and behaviors that Diane had apparently described to them in detail. When they expressed concern about my financial instability, they mentioned exact examples of irresponsible spending and business failures that Diane had reported. The sophistication of her deception was breathtaking. She had not simply claimed to own the house, she had built a comprehensive story explaining why the family needed to unite against my supposed problems. She had transformed herself from a divorced mother receiving housing assistance into a successful property owner dealing with a troubled sister. From my kitchen window vantage point, I could see small clusters of conversation happening throughout the backyard. People were processing what they believed was a family crisis, discussing their concerns and their planned responses with the seriousness of people genuinely trying to help. Near the flower garden, my parents were talking quietly with Aunt Ruth about the best way to approach me during the intervention. They were clearly strategizing about how to communicate firm boundaries while maintaining family love and support. At the picnic table, Uncle Frank was showing Cousin Bradley some kind of legal document on his phone, probably tenant rights information that he thought would help with my eviction. His real estate expertise was being used to make Diane's fraud more legally sophisticated. By the badminton net, Sarah and Jessica were discussing transitional housing options, researching programs that could help me establish independent living after my supposed breakdown. They were genuinely trying to identify resources that would help me rebuild my life after leaving what they thought was Diane's property. The sight of these caring people investing time and energy into solving a completely fabricated problem filled me with rage that I struggled to control. Diane was not just stealing rent money and planning property fraud. She was manipulating the love and concern of our entire extended family. Jake appeared in the kitchen doorway looking tense and determined. "Carol, I think you need to know what Diane just told everyone. She announced that you have been making threats about refusing to leave peacefully, and she is worried you might try to damage the property or steal things when you go." My heart sank as I understood how Diane was preparing her defenses. She was preemptively discrediting anything I might say by claiming I was becoming unstable and potentially violent. When I produced evidence of my property ownership, people would assume I had forged documents or was having some kind of psychotic episode. She also told them, "You have been talking about hiring lawyers to fight the eviction," which she says proves you are completely detached from reality, since you have no legal standing to challenge her decision. The brilliance of this strategy was terrifying. Diane was turning my legitimate property rights into evidence of mental illness. When I claimed to own the house, family members would see it as confirmation that I needed professional help rather than family accommodation. "Jake, I need you to understand something important. When I show the family my property documents in a few minutes, some people might not believe them immediately. Diane has been preparing them to think I am delusional, so they might assume I forged the papers or am confused about legal ownership. I will support you no matter what they say, Carol. I know what I witnessed, and I will tell everyone exactly what I saw and heard." "Thank you. Your support means everything to me right now." As Jake returned to the backyard, I realized I was facing a more complex challenge than I had anticipated. This was not just about presenting evidence. It was about overcoming months of psychological preparation that had primed my family to reject anything I might say in my own defense. But I also knew that truth had a power that lies could never match. Property records did not lie. County databases did not have psychological breakdowns. Mortgage companies did not participate in delusions. No matter how skillfully Diane had prepared her narrative, she could not change the fundamental facts about legal ownership, financial responsibility, and documented fraud. I picked up my evidence folder and headed for the back door, knowing that the next few minutes would determine whether truth or manipulation would control our family relationships going forward. Stepping onto the back patio felt like walking into a courtroom where I was simultaneously the defendant, the prosecutor, and the key witness in a case that would determine my future within this family. The late afternoon sun created dramatic shadows across the gathering, and I noticed how everyone seemed genuinely relaxed and content despite supposedly dealing with a major family crisis. Conversations were flowing naturally around different clusters of relatives. Children were playing with sidewalk chalk near the garage. Adults were sharing stories and catching up on each other's lives. The atmosphere felt more like a celebration than an intervention, which made what I was about to reveal feel even more shocking. I walked toward the center of the gathering, carrying my manila envelope with careful deliberation. Several people noticed my approach and began gravitating toward a more central location, apparently recognizing that something significant was about to happen. Diane was standing near the grill tongs in hand, looking every bit the gracious hostess managing a successful family event on her beautiful property. She smiled at me with what appeared to be genuine warmth, though I could now detect the calculation behind her expression. "Carol, we were just talking about some practical arrangements for your transition tomorrow. Roger has offered to help with moving your belongings, and Sarah has found some really good resources for temporary housing assistance." The kindness in her voice made the deception even more cruel. She was offering help with problems she had created, positioning herself as the solution to crises she had fabricated. Everyone has been so supportive and understanding about this difficult situation. I think this experience is going to bring our family closer together and help everyone learn about healthy boundaries and tough love. Uncle Frank nodded approvingly. Diane has handled this with remarkable grace and maturity. Not everyone would have the strength to make hard decisions about family members who need professional help. The way they spoke about me as if I were not standing 3 feet away demonstrated how thoroughly they had accepted Diane's portrayal of the situation. In their minds, I was someone who needed management, rather than intervention, rather than consideration. "I have something important to share with everyone," I announced, raising my voice slightly to ensure the entire gathering could hear me. "Something that will change how you understand this situation." Diane's smile faltered almost imperceptibly, but she maintained her concerned expression. "Carol, if you're feeling overwhelmed or emotional about tomorrow, that is completely understandable. Change is always difficult, but everyone here loves you and wants to help you through this transition." "This is not about my emotions, Diane. This is about facts that everyone deserves to know." I could see family members exchanging glances, probably interpreting my serious tone as confirmation of the emotional instability Diane had described. Several people moved closer, apparently preparing to provide support during what they expected would be an emotional breakdown. My mother stepped forward with tears already forming in her eyes. "Sweetheart, we know this is hard for you, but sometimes we all need help getting back on track. There is no shame in accepting support from people who love you." The genuine love and concern in her voice nearly broke my resolve. These people truly believed they were helping me by supporting what they thought was a necessary intervention. They had no idea they were participating in an elaborate fraud designed to steal my property and destroy my reputation. Mom, I need everyone to listen carefully to what I am about to tell you. I have documentation that will explain exactly what has been happening here, and everyone needs to see this information before making any decisions about my future. Just as I reached for the manila envelope, Diane suddenly gasped and pressed her hand against her chest, stumbling backward against the picnic table. Oh God, I am having chest pains. Something is wrong. I think I might be having a heart attack. The gathering erupted into immediate concern and activity. Uncle Roger rushed to support Diane as she appeared to struggle for breath. Aunt Margaret grabbed her phone to call for emergency assistance. My father began clearing space around Diane while asking her to describe her symptoms. It is the stress, Diane managed to say between labored breaths. This whole situation with Carol has been so emotionally exhausting. I have been trying to stay strong for everyone, but I think my body is finally breaking down. The timing was too convenient to be coincidental. Diane had recognized that I was about to reveal damaging information, and she was creating a medical emergency to derail the conversation and maintain control of the situation. But I also realized this might be my only opportunity to present evidence while everyone was gathered together. If we ended the barbecue to deal with Diane's supposed medical crisis, I might not get another chance to expose the truth before she implemented additional defensive strategies. Before we call for medical help, I think it would reduce Diane's stress level significantly if everyone understood the actual facts about the property ownership situation. Diane's breathing became even more labored, and she gestured weakly toward her chest. Carol, please. This is not the time for whatever conspiracy theories you want to share. I need medical attention. Uncle Frank looked at me with obvious disapproval. Carol, your sister, is having a medical emergency. Whatever issues you want to discuss can wait until she gets proper treatment. Actually, Frank, I think you will find this information directly relevant to Diane's stress levels. And as someone with real estate experience, your expertise would be valuable in helping everyone understand these documents. I opened the manila envelope and removed the property deed, holding it high enough for everyone to see the official county seal and legal formatting. This is the official property deed for this house recorded at the county courthouse 3 years ago. It shows that I am the sole legal owner of this property and that I have been for the entire time Diane has been living here. Diane's chest pains seemed to improve dramatically as she realized I was proceeding with my revelation despite her medical distraction attempt. Carol, what are you talking about? That cannot be right. But Uncle Frank had stepped forward to examine the document, his real estate experience allowing him to recognize authentic legal paperwork immediately. This appears to be a legitimate property deed, he said slowly, his voice carrying a note of confusion. The county seal and recording stamps look authentic. The backyard fell into a silence so profound that I could hear the distant hum of traffic from the street and the gentle buzzing of insects in Grandma Helen's flower garden. 20 pairs of eyes were focused on Uncle Frank as he examined the property deed with the careful attention of someone who understood exactly what he was looking at. Frank's expression shifted from confusion to surprise to something approaching shock as he processed the implications of the document in his hands. This deed is definitely authentic. It shows Carol purchased this property at county auction 3 years ago for $87,000, covering all outstanding debts and liens. Diane's chest pains had mysteriously subsided, though she remained seated at the picnic table with Uncle Roger hovering protectively nearby. There must be some mistake, Frank. Carol does not have that kind of money. She can barely afford her basic living expenses. Actually, let me show you the mortgage documentation that explains exactly how I financed this purchase. I handed Frank the Heritage private lending paperwork, including the verification letter that had arrived just an hour earlier. His real estate expertise allowed him to understand the significance immediately. This shows a private mortgage loan with excellent payment history. Carol has been making monthly payments of $1,437 for 3 years without missing a single payment. The numbers hit the family like successive shock waves. Many of them struggled to make monthly rent payments half that size, and the idea that I had been quietly managing such substantial financial obligations contradicted everything Diane had told them about my supposed irresponsibility. My mother was the first to find her voice. "Carol, is this really true? You own Grandma Helen's house." "Yes, Mom. I bought it when everyone else was arguing about what to do with it. I did not want to see it sold to strangers, so I found financing and purchased it myself." Uncle Roger looked confused and slightly betrayed, but Diane told me she inherited the property and was letting me move into the second floor. I have been making arrangements based on that understanding. Diane does not own this property and never has. She has been living here as my guest since her divorce, but she has been telling everyone she owns the house and has been supporting me financially. Sarah pulled out her phone and began frantically deleting the housing assistance information she had been researching for my supposed transition. "Diane, how could you let us believe Carol was the one with problems when you were the one lying about everything?" But Diane was not ready to surrender control of the narrative. "You do not understand what has been happening here. Carol has been having serious mental health issues. She is confused about financial arrangements and legal ownership. I have been trying to help her, but she has become delusional about these documents." Jake stepped forward with the courage I had been hoping to see. "That is not true, Diane. I saw you going through Carol's mail and hiding letters from her mortgage company. I heard you on the phone talking to people about rental properties and lease agreements like you were a landlord." The family's attention shifted to Jake, and I could see they were processing his accusations with the same shock they had shown toward my property documents. Jake, you are just a teenager. You do not understand adult financial arrangements," Diane said, but her voice lacked its earlier confidence. "I understand enough to know that Carol's mail should not be hidden in your bedroom. I found the letters when I was looking for my baseball glove last week." Uncle Frank was still examining my documentation with growing understanding. "Carol, these utility bills, tax payments, and insurance documents are all in your name going back 3 years. This is comprehensive proof of property ownership and financial responsibility. Frank, there is more you need to see." I handed him the evidence of Diane's rental income collection, including the cash payment records I had found and photographed. Diane has been charging Aunt Ruth $600 monthly for the garage apartment, and Bradley and Jessica $600 for the basement space. She has collected over $14,000 in rental income on property she does not own. Ruth gasped and covered her mouth with her hand. "Diane, I have been paying you rent for 8 months. Are you saying you do not actually own this house?" "Ruth, the situation is more complicated than Carol is making it seem. I have been managing the property and handling expenses." "Managing my property without my knowledge or permission," I corrected, "and keeping rental income that should have been going toward actual property expenses." Bradley and Jessica looked stunned as they realized they had been paying rent to someone who had no legal authority to collect it. "We gave you over $3,000 total," Jessica said. "We thought we were helping you pay your mortgage." "You were helping her commit fraud," Frank said grimly. "Collecting rent on property you do not own is illegal in this state." The family dynamics were shifting rapidly as people processed each new revelation. My parents were staring at Diane with expressions of growing horror, realizing how completely they had been deceived about both daughters. There is one more thing everyone needs to know. I continued producing the forged signature practice sheets I had discovered. Diane has been practicing my signature, apparently preparing to forge property documents. Frank examined the signature practice sheets and shook his head in disbelief. This could be evidence of attempted real estate fraud, which is a felony. "Carol, you should consider contacting law enforcement about these activities." Diane's composure finally cracked completely. This is all being blown out of proportion. I was trying to help Carol by managing things she could not handle herself. Everything I did was meant to protect her and preserve the family property. By lying to everyone about ownership and collecting rent money you had no right to receive, Roger asked, his voice carrying hurt and anger. Diane, I have been making moving arrangements based on your promises. I put deposits down on moving services and gave notice at my current apartment. The scope of people hurt by Diane's deception was becoming clear to everyone. Roger faced potential homelessness because of false housing promises. Ruth Bradley and Jessica had paid thousands of dollars to someone with no authority to collect rent. My parents had damaged their relationship with me based on lies about my character and capabilities. But perhaps, most significantly, I could see that family members were beginning to understand how easily they had accepted negative assumptions about me without questioning the source of their information. My mother was crying quietly, whether from relief that I was not actually in crisis or shame about how readily she had believed Diane's stories. Carol, I am so sorry. We should have talked to you directly instead of just accepting what Diane told us about your situation. Mom Diane is very convincing. She had answers for every question and explanations for every concern. I understand why you believed her. But even as I offered forgiveness, I could see that this revelation would change our family relationships permanently. Trust had been broken in ways that would take years to fully repair, and everyone would need time to process how thoroughly they had been manipulated. The afternoon sun was beginning to set, casting golden light across the backyard where 20 people were grappling with the destruction of everything they thought they knew about this family crisis. The golden evening light seemed to spotlight the devastating transformation happening across our family gathering. What had begun as a supportive intervention was rapidly becoming a reckoning with betrayal, manipulation, and fraud that reached into every relationship present. Uncle Frank continued examining my documentation with the methodical thoroughness of someone who understood the legal implications of what he was witnessing. Carol, this evidence is overwhelming. You have been the legitimate property owner for 3 years, managing significant financial obligations, while Diane collected unauthorized rental income and misrepresented the situation to everyone. The family absorbed this confirmation in waves of shock and recognition. I could see people mentally reviewing conversations, promises, and assumptions that were now revealed as products of systematic deception. Aunt Margaret approached me with tears in her eyes. Carol, I researched transitional housing programs for you today. I spent 2 hours on the phone trying to find services that could help you after your eviction. I was so worried about where you would live and how you would survive. The pain in her voice reflected the emotional toll of realizing she had been manipulated into participating in something that would have genuinely harmed me. Her caring research had been based on completely false information, turning her love and concern into weapons against me. Margaret, your willingness to help means everything to me. Diane used your good heart against both of us. Cousin Sarah was staring at her phone where she had been taking notes about mental health resources and financial counseling services. I have a list of therapists who specialize in helping adults with dependency issues. I was planning to give this to you tomorrow as a going-away gift. The irony was devastating. Sarah had invested genuine time and care into research that could have helped someone, but that someone was not me. The person who actually needed mental health support was sitting at the picnic table having orchestrated months of psychological manipulation against her own family. Bradley was examining the rental receipts Frank had passed around his young face, showing a mixture of confusion and anger. Diane, we trusted you completely. We paid you rent in cash every month because you said family does not need formal leases. We never questioned anything because we thought you were being incredibly generous. Jessica nodded emphatically. We recommended you to friends who were looking for affordable housing. We told people you were the best landlord we had ever had because you were so understanding and flexible. The realization that they had unknowingly promoted Diane's fraud to outsiders added another layer of humiliation to their discovery. They had acted as unwitting accomplices in expanding her criminal enterprise beyond family members. Uncle Roger was the most visibly affected by the revelations. As a recent divorcee who had been struggling with housing instability, he had viewed Diane's offer as a lifeline that would provide security and family connection during a difficult life transition. Diane, I gave notice at my apartment effective Monday. My landlord has already found replacement tenants, so I cannot go back. I scheduled moving trucks, transferred my mail delivery, and told my employer about my new address. What am I supposed to do now? The practical consequences of Diane's lies were becoming concrete and immediate. Roger faced homelessness in less than 48 hours because of promises Diane had no authority to make. But I also saw an opportunity to demonstrate the kind of family support that should have been present all along. Roger, you can stay in the guest room upstairs until you find permanent housing. I will not charge you rent, but I do expect honesty and respect while you are here. Relief flooded his face, followed by visible shame. Carol, after how I treated you today and how readily I believed negative things about you, I do not deserve your kindness. Roger, you were protecting someone you thought needed help. That shows good character even though you were misled about who actually needed protection. Jake stepped forward with information that made the situation even more damaging. There is something else everyone should know. I overheard Diane on the phone yesterday talking about property appraisals and real estate agents. She was scheduling meetings to discuss selling the house. The family turned toward Diane with expressions of pure horror. Collecting unauthorized rent was serious enough, but planning to sell property she did not own elevated her actions into major felony territory. Frank shook his head grimly. Attempting to sell real estate you do not own is fraud in the first degree. Combined with the forged signature attempts, Diane could be facing years in prison. My mother was sobbing openly now, overwhelmed by the scope of deception and its potential consequences. Diane, how could you even consider selling Grandma Helen's house? That property has been in our family for 60 years. I was trying to solve everyone's financial problems, Diane said weakly. The house is worth so much money now, and I thought we could divide the proceeds among family members who really need help. By stealing my property and forging my signature, I asked. Diane, this was not a misguided attempt to help the family. This was planned fraud designed to make you wealthy at my expense. The distinction was important for everyone to understand. Diane was not a confused family member who had made poor decisions with good intentions. She was someone who had systematically planned to commit serious crimes while using family loyalty to avoid detection. Cousin Sarah was reviewing text messages on her phone, her expression growing more horrified with each screen. Diane, you have been sending me updates about Carol's supposed mental health crisis for months. You told me she was having paranoid episodes and making threats against family members. You sent similar messages to me, Margaret added. You said Carol was becoming increasingly unstable and that the family needed to prepare for some kind of intervention. The organized nature of Diane's campaign was becoming clear. She had not simply told lies when directly questioned. She had actively distributed false information to multiple family members, building a coordinated narrative that portrayed me as dangerous and unreliable. Uncle Frank was photographing my documentation with his phone, apparently recognizing the need to preserve evidence. Carol, you should contact the county sheriff's office about this situation. What Diane has done goes far beyond family disputes. This is criminal activity that needs official investigation. Frank, I want to give Diane an opportunity to resolve this privately before involving law enforcement. But if she continues lying or refuses to make restitution to the people she defrauded, I will definitely pursue legal action. Diane looked genuinely terrified for the first time since I had known her. The confident, manipulative woman who had been orchestrating this deception was replaced by someone who finally understood the serious consequences of her actions. Carol, I never meant for things to go this far. Everything just got so complicated after Tom and I divorced. I was desperate for stability and security, and I made increasingly bad decisions trying to create the life I wanted. This was the first acknowledgement that her actions had been deliberate, rather than confused misunderstandings. The admission carried weight because it came after overwhelming evidence had made denial impossible. Ruth approached us both, her voice shaking with emotion. Diane, I am 73 years old living on a fixed income. The money I paid you in rent came from my grocery budget and my medical expenses account. I sacrificed necessities because I thought I was helping family and securing my housing. The human cost of Diane's fraud was becoming personal and immediate. Ruth had been financially exploited during a vulnerable period of her life, forced to choose between rent payments and basic needs because someone she trusted was stealing from her. Bradley and Jessica were holding hands, probably calculating how much money they had lost and what that meant for their savings goals. As a young couple just starting their careers, $3,000 represented months of careful budgeting and sacrifice. We were planning to use our savings for an engagement ring and wedding expenses, Jessica said quietly. The money we paid you was going to be part of our future together. The emotional weight of these individual stories was transforming the family's anger from abstract disapproval into personal outrage. Everyone could see that Diane had not just lied about property ownership. She had stolen money from people who trusted her, damaging their financial security and future plans. As the sun continued setting, I realized we had reached a turning point where the family understood the scope of deception, but had not yet decided how to respond. The next few minutes would determine whether this revelation led to healing and accountability or further division and conflict. The evening air had grown cooler, but the intensity of emotions radiating from our family gathering created an atmosphere that felt almost electric. 20 people who had arrived believing they were supporting a necessary intervention were now grappling with the discovery that they had been manipulated into participating in a campaign of fraud and character assassination. The transformation in family dynamics was swift and decisive. People who had been offering me sympathy and advice about my supposed problems were now directing their concern and anger toward Diane. The shift was so dramatic that I almost felt sorry for her watching her support system collapse in real time. Uncle Roger was the most vocal about his sense of betrayal. As someone who had been promised housing and had made concrete plans based on those promises, he felt personally victimized by Diane's deception. Diane, I defended you to people who questioned why you were being so harsh with Carol. I told my friends that sometimes family members need tough love to get their lives back on track. I was completely convinced that you were doing the right thing. His anger carried special weight because he had been one of Diane's strongest supporters during the earlier intervention discussions. His public reversal demonstrated how quickly the family consensus was shifting as people processed the full scope of the deception. Aunt Margaret was examining the rental receipts that Frank had distributed her accounting background, allowing her to understand the financial implications clearly. Diane, you collected $14,400 in unauthorized rent over 8 months. That averages to $1,800 per month in income you had no legal right to receive. The precision of Margaret's calculations made the theft feel more concrete and serious. This was not casual dishonesty. This was systematic financial exploitation that had generated substantial illegal income. Margaret, there is more. I added, producing bank deposit slips I had discovered among Diane's belongings. These show she has been depositing the rental payments into a separate account, apparently treating this income as a legitimate business enterprise. Frank examined the deposit records with growing dismay. This proves premeditation and intent to commit ongoing fraud. Diane was not confused about ownership. She was deliberately operating an illegal rental business, using property she knew she did not own. My parents were struggling to process the revelation that one daughter had been systematically abusing the other while presenting herself as a responsible family member. The psychological complexity of this betrayal was particularly difficult for them to accept. "Diane, we praised you for taking care of your troubled sister," my father said, his voice heavy with shame. "We told people how proud we were of your patience and generosity. We criticized Carol for not appreciating your help." My mother was beyond tears, moving into a kind of shocked numbness that suggested she was overwhelmed by the scope of her misjudgment. "We owe you such a profound apology, Carol. We should have talked to you directly instead of accepting Diane's version of events without question." Mom Diane is very skilled at manipulation. She had convincing answers for every concern and logical explanations for every inconsistency. "I understand why you believed her." But even as I offered forgiveness, I could see that my parents would need time to process their guilt about how readily they had accepted negative assumptions about me. Their shame was genuine and would likely influence our relationship for years to come. Cousin Sarah was scrolling through months of text messages from Diane, her expression growing more horrified as she reviewed the systematic campaign of character assassination she had unknowingly supported. "Diane, you sent me detailed updates about Carol's supposed mental health deterioration. You described specific incidents of erratic behavior and concerning statements. I was genuinely worried about her safety and well-being. You convinced me that Carol was becoming paranoid and potentially dangerous to herself," Margaret added. "I was researching crisis intervention services because I thought she might need emergency psychiatric evaluation." The realization that Diane had fabricated detailed mental health crises was particularly disturbing because it demonstrated sophisticated psychological manipulation. She had not simply lied about property ownership. She had created false narratives about my mental state that could have led to forced psychiatric interventions. Jake was documenting the conversation with his phone, apparently recognizing the historical significance of this moment for our family. His courage in speaking truth despite potential adult disapproval had been crucial in exposing the deception. "Jake, thank you for being willing to tell everyone what you witnessed," I said. "Your honesty probably prevented Diane from committing even more serious crimes." "I knew something was wrong when I saw how differently Diane talked about you when you were not around. She was always critical and negative, but she acted concerned and supportive when you were present." This observation highlighted the calculated nature of Diane's deception. She had been maintaining different personalities for different audiences, carefully managing information flow to support her false narratives. Bradley and Jessica were having a quiet conversation about their options for recovering the money they had paid in fraudulent rent. As victims of theft, they had legal rights that needed protection. "Bradley, you and Jessica should document every payment you made to Diane," Frank advised. "In criminal fraud cases, victims often have the right to restitution as part of any plea agreement or conviction." "What about Aunt Ruth?" Jessica asked. "She has been paying rent much longer than we have, and she can afford the loss much less than we can." Ruth was sitting quietly, probably calculating how much of her limited income had been stolen over 8 months of fraudulent rent payments. As a widow on a fixed pension, the financial impact of Diane's fraud was particularly severe. "Ruth, I want to help you recover every dollar Diane took from you," I said. "You trusted family, and that trust was violated in the worst possible way." The conversation was interrupted by the arrival of Uncle Roger's moving truck, which he had scheduled based on Diane's false housing promises. The driver was expecting to help move furniture into the house, unaware that the entire arrangement was based on fraud. Roger walked toward the truck with visible embarrassment. probably preparing to explain that the moving arrangement was canceled due to circumstances beyond his control. The practical consequences of Diane's lies were literally arriving at our doorstep. Roger let me talk to the moving company, I offered. I can explain that there was a miscommunication about housing arrangements and that we need to reschedule your move. This small gesture of support seemed to mean a great deal to Roger, who was clearly struggling with shame about his role in the day's events. Carol, your kindness after how I treated you shows incredible character. I do not deserve your help. Roger, you were trying to protect someone you thought needed protection. That shows good character, even though you were misled about the actual situation. As I walked toward the moving truck, I could hear the family conversation continuing behind me. People were processing individual pieces of the deception, sharing their own experiences with Diane's lies, and beginning to understand how systematically they had all been manipulated. The moving company situation provided a concrete example of how Diane's fraud had created real consequences for innocent people. Roger faced potential homelessness, the moving company had wasted time and resources, and everyone involved would need to adjust their plans based on false information. But resolving this immediate crisis also gave me an opportunity to demonstrate the kind of family support that should have been present all along. By helping Roger find actual housing solutions, I could show the difference between genuine care and manipulative control. As I returned from the moving truck, I could see that the family dynamics had fundamentally shifted. People were now looking to me for leadership and solutions, recognizing that I was the one who had been wronged, rather than the one who needed intervention. This reversal of roles felt both vindicating and overwhelming. After months of being portrayed as the family problem, I was now being asked to help solve the actual crisis that Diane's deception had created. The moving truck situation had provided a brief intermission, but returning to the backyard felt like walking back into a courtroom where the final verdict was being delivered. The family had used those few minutes to process the full scope of what they had learned, and their expressions now carried a gravity that had been absent during the earlier intervention discussions. I approached the group carrying a manila folder I had prepared specifically for this moment, formal legal documentation that would establish clear boundaries and consequences for Diane's actions. The time for family discussions and emotional processing had passed. We needed concrete solutions that would protect everyone involved and prevent further fraud. Diane, I have consulted with my attorney, and we have prepared formal documentation regarding your residency here and the restitution you owe to family members you defrauded. I handed her an official eviction notice prepared on legal letterhead and properly notarized according to state requirements. The document gave her 30 days to vacate the property, but I was prepared to offer more generous terms if she cooperated with restitution efforts. However, I am willing to modify these terms based on your willingness to make things right with the people you hurt. You have two choices: cooperate voluntarily with a restitution plan and leave within 1 week with my assistance finding alternative housing, or face formal legal proceedings for fraud, theft, and attempted forgery. Uncle Frank examined the eviction notice and nodded approvingly. This document is properly prepared and legally enforceable. Carol is being more generous than most property owners would be in this situation. Diane read through the legal papers with growing recognition that her situation had become seriously precarious. The confident manipulator who had orchestrated months of deception was replaced by someone who finally understood that actions have consequences. Carol, I know I made mistakes, but calling lawyers and threatening criminal prosecution seems excessive. We should be able to resolve this within the family without involving outside authorities. Diane, you committed theft, fraud, and attempted forgery. These are not family disputes. They are crimes that hurt real people in measurable ways. I turned to address the family members who had been victimized by her rental fraud. Ruth, Bradley, Jessica, you have all been victims of theft, and you have legal rights that need protection. I want to help you recover every dollar you lost, but that will require holding Diane accountable through official processes. Ruth was the first to respond, her voice stronger than I had heard all day. Carol, I want my money back. I sacrificed groceries and medical expenses because I thought I was helping family. I cannot afford to let someone steal from me just because we are related. Bradley and Jessica exchanged glances before Jessica spoke for both of them. We want restitution too. That money represented months of saving for our future together. We cannot just pretend this did not happen. The unanimous demand for accountability seemed to surprise Diane, who had probably expected family loyalty to override legal consequences. She was learning that relationships built on trust cannot survive systematic betrayal. I do not have $14,000 to pay everyone back immediately, Diane admitted. My divorce settlement is tied up in legal proceedings, and I have been using the rental income for basic living expenses. Then we will work out a payment plan that allows you to make restitution over time, I replied. But the payments need to be documented and legally enforceable so everyone knows their money will be recovered. Frank was taking notes on his phone, apparently recognizing that this conversation needed official documentation. Carol, I can help prepare a restitution agreement that protects everyone's interests. Diane needs legal representation to ensure she understands her obligations and her rights. The suggestion that Diane needed a lawyer seemed to finally drive home the seriousness of her situation. This was no longer a family barbecue discussion. It was a legal proceeding that could result in criminal charges and civil liability. Uncle Roger stepped forward with information that added another dimension to the accountability discussion. Diane, I need compensation for the moving expenses and apartment deposits I lost because of your false housing promises. I am out nearly $2,000 in non-refundable costs. Roger, I will include those expenses in the restitution calculation, I assured him. Everyone who suffered financial losses because of Diane's deception deserves to be made whole. My parents were observing this process with expressions that mixed relief, shame, and concern. They seemed relieved that I was handling the situation with restraint and fairness rather than vindictiveness, but ashamed that they had supported the person who was causing all this damage. Carol, we want to contribute to the property maintenance and repairs as a way of apologizing for our treatment of you, my father offered. We know money cannot undo the emotional damage we caused by believing lies about you, but we want to do something tangible to show our remorse. Dad, I appreciate the gesture, but I do not want anyone feeling obligated to pay for Diane's deception. What I need from you and Mom is a commitment to honest communication going forward. This distinction was important for everyone to understand. I was not seeking revenge or financial benefit from exposing the fraud. I was working to restore truth and protect innocent people from further harm. Jake approached with his phone, which had been recording key portions of the conversation. Carol, I documented Diane admitting that she collected rent payments and knew she did not own the property. This recording could be important if you need evidence for legal proceedings. The presence of documented admissions would make any future legal action much stronger. Diane had admitted to fraud in front of multiple witnesses with electronic recordings preserving her statements. Jake, your documentation could be crucial for protecting everyone's rights. Thank you for having the courage to preserve evidence, even when adults were not paying attention to what was really happening. Diane was reading through the eviction notice again, apparently looking for loopholes or alternatives that might allow her to maintain some control over the situation. But the document had been prepared by professionals who understood property law, and her options were limited. Carol, if I agree to your restitution plan and move out voluntarily, will you agree not to pursue criminal charges? This was the critical negotiation point where Diane would learn whether cooperation could minimize her legal exposure. I had been prepared for this question and had clear conditions for any agreement. Diane, I will consider not filing criminal charges if you make full restitution to everyone you defrauded, move out within 1 week, and provide a written confession that can be used to protect innocent family members if questions arise in the future. A written confession seems extreme. What if I just agree to pay everyone back and leave quietly? Diane, you spent months systematically lying about me to our entire family. Those lies damaged relationships and could have destroyed my reputation permanently. I need documentation that clears my name and explains what really happened here. The family was watching this negotiation with fascination, seeing justice being administered with precision and fairness. I was not seeking excessive punishment, but I was insisting on accountability that would prevent future harm. Uncle Frank nodded approvingly at my conditions. Carol is being remarkably fair considering the scope of fraud involved. Most property owners would have called police immediately upon discovering unauthorized rental collection and attempted forgery. As the sun set completely and evening darkness settled over the backyard, I realized we had reached the point where Diane would need to make her choice. Cooperation would lead to manageable consequences and family support for her transition. Resistance would lead to criminal prosecution and permanent legal problems. The next few minutes would determine whether this family crisis could be resolved through justice and accountability, or whether it would require law enforcement intervention to protect innocent people from further victimization. The patio lights had come on automatically as darkness settled over our gathering, creating an intimate atmosphere that seemed somehow appropriate for the serious conversation about rebuilding trust and establishing healthy family relationships. 20 people who had started the day believing one version of reality were now working together to process a completely different truth. I had spent the past few minutes organizing my thoughts about what needed to happen next. Exposing Diane's deception was only the first step in a longer process of healing damaged relationships and protecting family members from future manipulation. Everyone, I want to establish some clear boundaries and expectations that will help us move forward in a healthy way. What happened today exposed serious problems in how our family communicates and makes decisions, and we need to address those problems to prevent similar situations in the future. I addressed the group as a whole while maintaining eye contact with different individuals to ensure everyone felt included in the conversation. First, I welcome family visits and gatherings here, but I will no longer tolerate dishonesty, financial exploitation, or character assassination. This is a safe space for people who treat each other with respect and honesty. Uncle Frank nodded approvingly. Those boundaries sound reasonable and necessary after what has happened here. Second, if family members need housing assistance during genuine emergencies, I am willing to help on a temporary basis, but any arrangements will be transparent, documented, and based on mutual respect rather than deception or manipulation. This offer was particularly relevant for Uncle Roger, who still needed housing solutions despite the collapse of Diane's false promises. But it also established that my generosity would be based on honesty rather than enabling behavior that hurt other people. Third, I expect everyone to communicate directly with me about concerns or questions, rather than accepting secondhand information from anyone else. If someone tells you I am having problems, talk to me directly before making assumptions or taking action. My parents exchanged glances that suggested they understood how their willingness to accept Diane's reports without verification had contributed to the family crisis. This boundary would help prevent future manipulation while encouraging healthier communication patterns. Aunt Margaret raised her hand like she was in a classroom, apparently wanting permission to speak. Carol, we all owe you a sincere apology for how readily we believed negative things about you. Looking back, we should have noticed that all the concerning information was coming from the same source. Shyam, Margaret, I appreciate your apology, but I also want everyone to understand that manipulative people are skilled at making their lies seem credible. Diane had convincing explanations for everything and appeared genuinely concerned about my well-being. This distinction was important because I did not want family members feeling so ashamed about being deceived that they became defensive or resistant to honest self-reflection. Everyone had been victimized by Diane's manipulation, even though I had borne the worst of the consequences. What I need from everyone going forward is a commitment to verify information before acting on it, especially when that information involves judging or intervening in another family member's life. Jake was still documenting the conversation, apparently recognizing that these boundary discussions would be important for future reference. His attention to detail and commitment to truth had been crucial in exposing the deception. Jake, I want to offer you a part-time job helping me with my graphic design business. You have shown excellent observation skills and integrity under pressure, which are exactly the qualities I need in a business assistant. Jake's face lit up with surprise and gratitude. Really, I would love to learn about graphic design and business management from you. This offer served multiple purposes. It provided Jake with income and learning opportunities while demonstrating that supporting truth and justice leads to positive consequences. It also gave me additional help with my growing business demands. My parents approached together, apparently having discussed their response to the day's revelations. Carol, we want to contribute to property maintenance and improvements as a way of showing our support and making up for our mistakes. My mother offered. Actually, there is something specific you could help with. The roof needs replacement before winter, and that is a major expense that would benefit from family assistance. This practical contribution would allow my parents to demonstrate their support tangibly while helping with legitimate property needs. It also established a pattern of transparent financial cooperation rather than hidden manipulation. Uncle Roger had been quiet during these discussions, probably processing his own housing needs and his shame about participating in the intervention against me. Carol, I know I do not deserve your help after how I treated you today, but I am genuinely grateful for your offer to let me stay temporarily while I find permanent housing. Roger, you were trying to help someone you thought needed protection. That shows good character, even though you were misled about the situation. I respect people who are willing to stand up for family members they believe are in trouble. This forgiveness was genuine, but it also served an educational purpose. I wanted family members to understand the difference between supporting people out of love versus enabling destructive behavior out of misplaced loyalty. Diane had been sitting quietly during these discussions, apparently recognizing that her role in future family dynamics would be severely limited, regardless of how she chose to handle the legal consequences of her fraud. Diane, I want you to understand that I am not trying to destroy your life or permanently exile you from the family, but you need to take responsibility for what you did and make meaningful changes to rebuild trust with people you hurt. What would that look like practically? She asked, her voice subdued. Complete honesty about what happened, full restitution to everyone you defrauded, and a commitment to transparent communication going forward. You also need to understand that rebuilding trust will take time and cannot be rushed. Uncle Frank was reviewing the restitution calculations on his phone. Based on the rental payments and moving expenses, Diane owes approximately $16,400 to family members. That is a significant amount that will require a structured payment plan. Frank, I am willing to work with Diane on reasonable payment terms if she demonstrates genuine cooperation and accountability, but the payments need to be legally documented to protect everyone involved. Cousin Sarah had been scrolling through months of text messages from Diane, apparently deleting the false reports about my supposed mental health problems. Diane, I need you to send a message to everyone explaining that your previous reports about Carol's problems were false. People need to know the truth. Sarah is right. I agreed. Everyone who received false information about me deserves to know that those reports were fabricated. This is not about humiliating Diane. It is about protecting my reputation from lasting damage. Ruth approached with a simple request that carried significant emotional weight. Diane, I want a written apology, acknowledging that you stole my rent money and explaining that I was not enabling bad behavior by paying you. I need something to show my friends who have been judging me for supporting what they thought was your generosity. The personal impact of Diane's deception extended far beyond our immediate family. Ruth had been defending what she thought was a generous housing arrangement to her social circle, and now she needed documentation to restore her own reputation. As we continued working through practical details and emotional needs, I realized that the family had fundamentally changed during the course of this single afternoon. Relationships based on assumptions and second-hand information had been replaced by demands for direct communication and verified facts. The process would not be easy for anyone involved, but it offered the possibility of genuine healing based on truth rather than comfortable illusions. For the first time in months, I felt optimistic about our family's future. 1 week later, I stood in the same backyard where the confrontation had taken place, but the atmosphere felt completely transformed. The deception and manipulation that had poisoned our family relationships was being replaced by honest communication and genuine support, though the healing process was proving more complex than anyone had anticipated. Diane had accepted my terms for avoiding criminal prosecution, and the past 7 days had been filled with difficult conversations, practical arrangements, and the slow work of rebuilding trust among people who had been systematically lied to for months. The moving process had been surprisingly collaborative. Rather than leaving Diane to handle everything alone, several family members had volunteered to help her pack and transition to her new apartment across town. Uncle Frank had used his real estate connections to find her affordable housing, and my parents had contributed toward her security deposit. This support was not enabling or denial. It was a conscious choice to separate disappointment in her actions from concern for her basic well-being. The family was learning to hold people accountable while still offering appropriate assistance during difficult transitions. "Yeah, Carol, I owe you more than an apology," Diane said as she taped the final box in what had been her bedroom. "I owe you an explanation of why I made such terrible decisions, even though I know explanations do not excuse what I did." I had been dreading this conversation while simultaneously recognizing it was necessary for any possibility of future reconciliation. Understanding her motivations would not change the consequences of her actions, but it might help prevent similar situations in other relationships. "Tell me what was really happening, Diane. Help me understand how someone I trusted could plan to steal my property and destroy my reputation." She sat on the edge of her bed, looking older and more fragile than I had ever seen her. "After the divorce, I was terrified about my future. Tom left me with debt, legal bills, and no clear way to support myself and Emma. When you offered to let me stay here temporarily, I was grateful, but I was also humiliated about needing help." This was the first time Diane had acknowledged feeling vulnerable rather than presenting herself as someone in control of every situation. Her admission carried weight because it came after she had lost the power to manipulate the narrative. When Ruth asked about renting the garage space, I saw an opportunity to generate income while helping family. But then I started telling people I owned the house because I was embarrassed about being dependent on my sister's generosity. "Diane, I never wanted you to feel embarrassed. I was genuinely happy to help you through a difficult time. I know that now, but at the time I was struggling with depression and anxiety about my future. The lies started small, just letting people assume I owned the property rather than correcting their assumptions. But then the lies grew bigger and more complicated as I tried to maintain the illusion. This pattern of escalating deception was familiar from psychology research about fraud and manipulation. Initial lies create additional problems that require more sophisticated lies to resolve, eventually creating unsustainable webs of fabrication. The rental income gave me a sense of financial security I had not felt since before my marriage fell apart. I convinced myself that I was managing the property effectively and that you were benefiting from my work even though you did not know about it. But Diane, you were also telling people I was mentally unstable and financially irresponsible. Those lies were designed to hurt me personally. Her expression shifted to genuine shame as she confronted the cruelest aspects of her deception. I was terrified that you would discover what I was doing and kick me out. I thought if everyone believed you were having problems, they would support my decision-making and never question my version of events. You were also planning to sell my property and forge my signature on legal documents. That goes far beyond protecting yourself. That was planning to commit serious crimes. Carol, by the time I was researching property sales, I was desperate and completely detached from reality. I had convinced myself that I deserved the house because I had been managing it, and that you would be better off with the money than with property ownership responsibilities. This rationalization revealed the depth of her psychological detachment from ethical thinking. She had created an alternate reality where stealing my property was somehow beneficial to me, demonstrating sophisticated self-deception alongside deliberate fraud. What scares me most is that I genuinely believed my own lies toward the end. I was not consciously planning to hurt you. I was convinced that I was solving problems and helping everyone involved. Jake knocked on the doorframe, apparently wanting to check on our conversation. Over the past week, he had become protective of both Diane and me, recognizing that everyone involved needed support during this difficult process. Diane, the moving truck will be here in about an hour. Do you need help finishing anything? Thank you, Jake. I think we have everything packed and ready. Jake had been remarkable during the past week, maintaining relationships with both sisters while refusing to enable dishonesty from anyone. His maturity and integrity had provided a model for how other family members could navigate the complex emotions surrounding the situation. After Jake left, Diane continued her explanation with what seemed like genuine self-reflection. The worst part is realizing how many people I hurt while convincing myself I was being helpful. Ruth struggled financially to pay me rent she could not afford. Bradley and Jessica sacrificed their savings. Roger made major life decisions based on my false promises. Diane, acknowledging the harm you caused is important, but what matters now is how you handle the restitution and rebuilding process. I want to pay everyone back, Carol. It will take time because I am starting over financially, but I want to make this right. Her restitution payments had already begun. She had secured a full-time job at a local marketing firm and arranged to pay $300 monthly until everyone who had been defrauded was made whole. The payments would take over 4 years to complete, but they were legally documented and automatically deducted from her paychecks. I also want you to know that I have started therapy to understand why I made such destructive decisions. I do not want to ever again put people I love in danger because of my own psychological problems. This commitment to professional help was encouraging, though I knew that real change would require sustained effort over months and years, rather than quick fixes or temporary resolutions. My parents appeared in the doorway, apparently wanting to participate in the final conversation, before Diane moved out completely. Over the past week, they had been working to rebuild their relationship with me while processing their shame about how readily they had believed negative reports about my character and capabilities. Diane, we want you to know that we love you and we support your efforts to take responsibility for your mistakes, my mother said. But we also need you to understand that rebuilding trust will take time and consistent, honest behavior. I understand, Mom. I know that I damaged relationships with everyone, and I do not expect immediate forgiveness or trust. My father added, "We have learned important lessons about questioning information before accepting it, especially when that information involves judging family members. We will not make those mistakes again." This commitment to verification and direct communication was perhaps the most positive outcome of the entire crisis. The family had learned to demand evidence for serious accusations and to communicate directly with people rather than accepting secondhand reports about their behavior or circumstances. As the afternoon progressed and moving preparations were completed, I found myself feeling cautiously optimistic about Diane's prospects for genuine change. Her explanations had revealed serious psychological problems that contributed to her poor decisions, but her willingness to seek professional help and make financial restitution suggested she understood the severity of her actions. The healing process would continue for years, requiring sustained effort from everyone involved. But the foundation of honesty and accountability we had established provided a framework for rebuilding relationships based on truth rather than comfortable illusions. When the moving truck finally arrived and Diane's belongings were loaded for transport to her new apartment, the family gathered for a brief farewell that felt both sad and hopeful. We were not celebrating her departure, but we were acknowledging that sometimes healing requires separation before reconciliation becomes possible. 3 months had passed since that transformative barbecue, and as I prepared the same backyard for another family gathering, I marveled at how completely our relationships had changed. The space that had once hosted deception and manipulation was about to welcome a celebration of honesty, accountability, and genuine healing. The November air carried the crisp promise of winter, and I had strung warm lights around the patio to create a welcoming atmosphere for family members who were still learning to trust each other again. This gathering would serve as both a celebration of our progress and a test of whether the changes in our family dynamics would prove sustainable over time. Uncle Roger emerged from the kitchen carrying a casserole dish, his presence in the house now completely natural and comfortable. His temporary stay had evolved into a permanent arrangement that benefited both of us. He contributed to household expenses and maintenance while enjoying the stability and family connection he needed during his post-divorce transition. "Carol, the turkey should be ready in about 20 minutes. Do you want me to start setting up the serving table?" "That would be perfect, Roger. Thank you for all your help with the cooking today." His transformation from someone who had supported my supposed eviction to someone who genuinely appreciated living here had been one of the most rewarding aspects of the past few months. Roger had proven himself to be honest, respectful, and helpful, everything that a good housemate should be. Jake bounded down the stairs, carrying his laptop, excited to share the graphic design portfolio he had been developing under my mentorship. Over the past 3 months, he had shown remarkable talent and dedication, creating professional quality work that impressed my business clients. "Carol, I finished the logo design for that restaurant client. Do you want to review it before I send the final files?" "Absolutely. Let me see what you have created." His design work had exceeded all my expectations, demonstrating creativity and technical skill that suggested a promising future in graphic design. More importantly, his integrity and work ethic had made him an ideal business partner who could handle increasing responsibilities as the business continued growing. "Jake, this logo is exceptional. The client is going to be thrilled with this work." His smile radiated pride and satisfaction, reflecting the confidence that comes from developing genuine skills through honest effort. The mentorship relationship had enriched both our lives while proving that supporting young people through real opportunities produces better outcomes than enabling problematic behavior. My parents arrived carrying side dishes and desserts, their comfort level in the house now completely natural after months of rebuilding our relationship through honest communication and mutual respect. They had worked hard to process their shame about believing Diane's lies while demonstrating their renewed trust in me through consistent support. Sweetheart, the house looks beautiful," my mother said, embracing me warmly. You have created such a welcoming space for family gatherings. Thank you, Mom. I'm grateful that we can all be together in an atmosphere of honesty and mutual respect. My father was examining the roof repairs that he and several other family members had helped fund, his contribution representing both practical support and symbolic acknowledgement of my property ownership. The new shingles and gutters would protect the house for decades while serving as a tangible reminder of our family's commitment to supporting each other appropriately. The roof looks excellent, Carol. You made a good choice with that contractor. Uncle Frank and Aunt Margaret arrived together, their legal and accounting expertise, having been crucial in documenting Diane's restitution payments and establishing clear boundaries for future family financial arrangements. They had learned valuable lessons about verifying information before offering professional advice. Thus, Carol, I brought copies of Diane's payment records for everyone who was affected by her fraud, Frank announced. She has made 3 monthly payments on schedule, and everyone should know that the restitution process is proceeding exactly as planned. This transparency about Diane's accountability efforts was important for maintaining trust and ensuring that justice remained visible to everyone involved. The family needed to see that consequences for harmful behavior were real and sustained rather than temporary or symbolic. Cousins Sarah and Bradley arrived with Jessica, their relationships with me now stronger than they had been before the crisis, because they were based on direct communication rather than assumptions or secondhand information. They had recovered most of their fraudulent rent payments and were using the money for their originally planned wedding expenses. Carol, we want to show you our wedding invitation design. We were hoping Jake might be interested in creating some custom graphics for our reception decorations. I would love to work on wedding graphics, Jake responded enthusiastically. Do you have ideas about themes or color schemes? This collaboration represented the kind of authentic family support that should have been present all along. People helping each other through genuine skills and mutual cooperation, rather than manipulation or exploitation. Ruth settled into her favorite lawn chair, looking more relaxed and confident than she had in months. Her experience as a fraud victim had been traumatic, but the family's support during her recovery had strengthened her sense of security and belonging. I'm Carol. I want you to know that living here has been the best housing situation I have ever experienced. You have created a true family environment based on respect and honesty. Ruth, you make this feel like a real home. Your presence here enriches everyone's experience. Ruth's gratitude was genuine, but it was also based on fair treatment, rather than false charity. She contributed appropriate amounts toward household expenses while enjoying the security and family connection that everyone deserves during their senior years. As the family gathered around the dinner table, I realized that we had achieved something that had seemed impossible 3 months earlier. We were celebrating genuine relationships based on truth, accountability, and mutual respect rather than comfortable illusions that protected harmful behavior. Before we eat, I want to share some news with everyone, I announced. Diane has successfully completed her first 3 months of therapy and restitution payments. She has also written personal apology letters to everyone who was affected by her fraud, acknowledging the specific harm she caused and her commitment to making things right. The family received this update with expressions that reflected complex emotions: hope for Diane's genuine change, satisfaction that justice was being served, and relief that accountability was being maintained consistently. Dr. Martinez, her therapist, reports that Diane has made significant progress in understanding the psychological factors that contributed to her destructive decision-making. She has also completed a financial literacy course to help her manage money more responsibly. Jake raised his hand with a question that demonstrated his continued investment in family healing. Does this mean Diane might be able to join family gatherings again someday? Jake, that possibility exists if Diane continues demonstrating genuine change over sustained periods of time. But rebuilding trust requires consistent, honest behavior, not just temporary improvements. This balance between hope and caution reflected the family's growing sophistication about enabling versus supporting. We wanted Diane to succeed, but we would not compromise our safety or integrity to accommodate behavior that had proven harmful. Uncle Frank nodded approvingly. Accountability and gradual trust rebuilding seems like the healthiest approach for everyone involved. As we shared the meal and conversation, I reflected on how dramatically our family dynamics had improved once truth replaced manipulation as the foundation for our relationships. People felt safe to be authentic because they knew honesty would be respected and dishonesty would be addressed appropriately. The evening concluded with heartfelt expressions of gratitude and commitment to maintaining the healthy communication patterns we had developed. Everyone understood that preserving these improvements would require ongoing effort and vigilance, but they had experienced the benefits of authentic relationships based on truth and mutual respect. As family members departed with promises to gather again, soon I stood in the backyard where everything had changed 3 months earlier. The space now felt peaceful and welcoming rather than tense with hidden conflicts and unspoken resentments. Jake helped me clean up while sharing his excitement about upcoming graphic design projects and his plans for developing additional business skills. Roger secured the house and checked the heating system before settling in for the evening. Ruth retreated to her apartment with leftovers and expressions of contentment about her living situation. The house felt full of positive energy and genuine family warmth, providing the kind of environment that Grandma Helen would have wanted when she created this space for multiple generations to gather and support each other. I had learned that standing up for truth sometimes requires difficult confrontations that temporarily increase conflict before resolving it. But I had also learned that authentic relationships are worth fighting for because they provide security and satisfaction that cannot be achieved through manipulation or enabling. Our family had discovered that accountability and forgiveness could coexist when people take genuine responsibility for their actions and commit to sustained change. We had also learned that love sometimes requires setting firm boundaries to protect innocent people from being hurt by those who have not yet learned to respect others. As I turned off the patio lights and headed inside, I felt grateful for the painful experience that had ultimately strengthened our family by forcing us to choose truth over comfortable illusions. The lessons we had learned would guide our relationships for years to come, creating a foundation of honesty and respect that could support genuine love and lasting connection. Life lesson. Sometimes the greatest act of love is refusing to enable someone's destructive behavior, and true family strength comes from accountability rather than blind loyalty. Thank you for joining me on this journey of family healing and personal growth. Have you ever experienced a situation where standing up for truth initially created more conflict before ultimately improving relationships? I would love to hear your thoughts and experiences in the comments below. If this story resonated with you, please like this video, subscribe to my channel for more authentic storytelling, and share this with anyone who might benefit from hearing about the power of choosing truth over comfortable illusions. Your support helps me continue creating content that explores the complex realities of family relationships and personal integrity. Wishing you the courage to stand up for truth and the wisdom to know when accountability serves love better than enabling. Take care, and I will see you in the next story.